has a lot of companies in a holding pattern, but some of those companies don't have the liquidity or the financial availability to continue to ride things out. So they're forced to make strategic guesses in how they do things. And are they going to be right? Are they going to be wrong? Time will tell. But staying complacent has them uneasy, and it's forcing them to act.
Thanks again for joining me here. I had Ryan Gross, director over at Getzler Heinrich and a board member of the Turnaround Management Association here in Detroit. We talk manufacturing, going through many challenges. He shared some pretty good tips and recommendations. Give it a listen, and I hope you guys enjoy. Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for joining today.
Of course. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you joining me here on the Cashflow Chronicles Open Forum. I think it's really exciting. I've had a number of people on this podcast talking about the challenges in the economy right now. And with your area of expertise, what is you're seeing right now in the marketplace that you're seeing companies aren't being proactive and you have to come in after the fact?
Yeah, it's the way things are right now. It's definitely a struggle for companies. One thing that I'm seeing a lot, and it's been brought up since March, April timeframe, is tariffs. Companies are using them as an excuse, but it's also giving them the opportunity to really look at things they probably should have been looking at early on. The tariffs have really put them in an uncertain spot. It has a lot of companies in a holding pattern, but some of those companies don't have the liquidity or the financial availability to continue to ride things out. So they're forced to make strategic guesses in how they do things. And are they going to be right? Are they going to be wrong? Time will tell. But staying complacent has them uneasy, and it's forcing them to act. Another thing that I'm seeing right now is some labor issues. You'll see it across the board everywhere you go, and unemployment is at the rate that it's at. But I found recently there's a real struggle to get quality employees in the factories on the floors. And part of that is because of AI technology has kind of made its way in there. And the labor force doesn't have the skilled employees to work those machines or those equipment. The other side of it is employees don't always want to work in hot factories in the summer or freezing cold factories in the winter when they can go down the street and get a job from another company making a little less, or potentially collect unemployment for a while and then really ramp it up after the summer hours.
Is that an issue you think is specific to manufacturing, or is that an issue across the board in general?
I think it's across the board in general, but it does apply to specific areas within the country. I know if you go southern middle of the country, it is definitely a more rural population and harder to find employees. And it just comes back to what's the education of the employees and what do the employees want to do, as well as what other opportunities are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always been the dynamic of the brain drain in the Midwest. Talk about, we have had people come here and like stay here to go to the education, like Michigan State, things like that. And they just go off to the West Coast and things like that. So how do we keep people here locally sourced that take pride in manufacturing jobs? I'm not sure if we see that to be a trend maybe 10 years down the road when everyone is trained up and apprentices and those roles become available. But if it's a short-term gap, or is it going to be more of a long-term gap?
For that aspect, it'll be a little bit of both, but it depends on where we go as an economy, both in Michigan and Midwest. I mean, if we get more manufacturing jobs and those jobs have the requirements of individuals who may have graduated from the local universities, or were here, went to university out of the state, or work out of the state but want to return home because their families are here, I think it's going to draw them back. I think one thing that appeals to a lot of younger folks out of university or out of college is the draw to a city. Whether you're from Michigan or from another area, people are called to go to a big city. And I don't think that if we look at the trends, that's going to be the long-term game. I think they'll be in the city for 2, 3, 5, maybe 7 years, start a family, and then realize that the costs of living in a big city are much higher. Let's move back to where family is, where we're more stable, we have more opportunities, and where the job market is a little bit more favorable.
You know, and it's interesting in Detroit, specifically, Detroit always had a connotation of being, no one wants to live in the city of Detroit. And you're starting to see a recurrence of people moving downtown. And in our age where we want to be away from downtown, and I think we can resonate with individuals going to Chicago out of college to experience that big city life, and they come back home to raise a family. It seems to be more of a common trend.
Definitely is. I can say a lot of my close friends and colleagues, it was something that they did. they enjoyed it. They learned a lot. They built a good foundation, whatever industry they're in, and they were able to come home and there were jobs and opportunities for them. They just had to look.
Absolutely. So let's get into the meat and bones a little bit relative to your work with various companies and the current status of the economy we're in right now. So what do you see most often in the Midwest here specifically, potential distress before it becomes critical? Is there certain signs with the companies?
Yeah, well, it's funny you asked that. Everywhere we go, being an advisor of, stress, distress, process improvement, people always wonder, is there a list of what I see? And truth be told, it's not usually one thing. There's kind of two ways to look at it. You've got operational and financial stress. Operational, it's really looking at lead times. When do things start declining? When is quality going down? Looking at, are we losing people in the facilities? And then also looking at back orders, et cetera, as inventory building. If all of that is occurring at once, then you probably have some issues. The other side of that is to look at the financial side. And that's really looking at margin shifts. You've got labor, you've got your costs. Are those going up not proportionate to the price? If that's happening, then you're definitely going to feel stress. Then you've got payables. You want to make sure that you're monitoring payables properly and strategically pushing them out if you can based on the relationships you have. AR is the other one. Is your AR aging out? Are you doing a poor job collecting? Oftentimes with AR, AP, and even inventory, you want to continue to push out the slow moving inventory, sell it. If you're not able to do that, oftentimes the companies have other issues internally with financial reporting. And if you can't report everything in a proper financial manner, you can't really see the picture. So it's usually a combination of those. Another thing that I really see and I stress with companies is deferring or maintenance or things within the facility. You always want to make sure you properly plan for that stuff, because I can't tell you how many times I've gone in there where a company's already been cash constrained. You go, you look at the floor and you say, okay, these machines need to be refurbished or replaced. And given the cash constraints, they're not able to. So those machines eventually break down. You put a Band-Aid on it by paying a premium for somebody to come in and fix them, when if you had put a proper plan together for replacement of CapEx, you would have avoided that. So it's really looking at it operationally and financially. And if a few of those things happen, you may start to see stress, which can turn into distress. And then it's potentially defaulting on a loan or overdrawing or becoming delinquent.
And I say this, the title of this podcast is the Cashflow Chronicles, where cash flow is king. Of course, that's the biggest thing. And there's so many factors that tie into that. I think you tied that in perfectly. So right now with tariffs is what it is. So my previous guest, Sheldon, came on and he talked about so many things that have been going on in the economy. Is there any industry outside of the commonly known automotive space right now that's seeing the biggest challenges that you can speak of?
I'd say each industry is seeing it in their own way. I mean, consumer products is definitely feeling the effects given what they get from China or from overseas, but even automotive or other industries where you may get metals from other countries outside the US, we're all feeling the effects of the tariffs. The hardest part with them right now is the uncertainty. It's not that there are tariffs. That's very difficult, but it's what are they going to be and how long are they going to be and what's the process so that you can plan for it. If you can't plan for it, like I said earlier, you're forced to take those strategic risks because you need to continue moving forward. You don't have the cash or the wherewithal to just kind of ride this out.
Yeah, and I think being proactive versus reactive, it's such a common theme because everyone's trying to pay their bills and just maintain operational efficiency. We're all trying to achieve profitability, but if you can set aside some of those funds to plan for the future, I think that's also really critical, because who would have thought we'd be in the position we are in a year ago? Let's be honest. So with all these rising input costs and obviously slowing orders due to so much uncertainty, people aren't making moves. What are some immediate steps, in your opinion, that leaders can take right now to really be more proactive versus reactive?
I would say it may seem simplistic, but when the companies I visit and people in my field visit, there's really just a few things. I mean, it's really making sure that you have a good financial plan, that it's not overly aggressive or overly optimistic, that it's true. Because again, we're only as good as the numbers that we have. So we've got to report that. But along that is really looking at your working capital, looking at your AR, your AP, making sure that you're collecting early, pushing payables strategically based on the relationships you have with vendors and suppliers and your customers, as well as selling your inventory. If inventory begins to build up and slows down, it causes a problem. So it's really looking at that working capital in a short manner, AR, AP, inventory. And then from there, you can start to analyze other areas that could be cost savings, insurance, rent, utilities, all of that stuff properly put in a budget really, really helps the company down the line.
How frequently do you come across companies where that budget is, and this is the very real, you could have the best intentions going through that process, but given the variables we're currently in, is it a very common thing that you see companies are simply?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes a common thing because a lot of the companies that we work with were thriving. They were doing well. They didn't necessarily need to put together a 13-week cash flow or budget in the way that we build budgets for them, really. I recommend that once we leave, they take our product and they continue to use it as a tool so that they can monitor. Other times, the companies don't have the back office. They may have a good controller, a good CFO, good payables clerk, good receivables clerk, but they don't have the ability or the time to put together that detailed 13-week cash flow with an integrated borrowing budget or a integrated model with it. So it's partially they've never had to do it, so it isn't required, but partially some of the skill sets may not have been there.
Because they're running a business and they have their strategic focus areas.
Exactly.
To bring someone in with a different skill set is super critical. And do you ever see bringing in a different perspective or like an agnostic perspective, which you bring to the table, adds value versus like, hey, I only work in automotive or I only work in food and beverage is more beneficial?
I think having somebody that specializes in the space is value add, but in certain holes that you may be in or given the situation, a lot of it's not different. When you're looking at AR, AP, forecasting when we're going to collect, when we're going to receive, a lot of that is the same. Now, in the automotive industry, it gets a little tricky because you're dealing with tooling and unique payment models but for the most part, it's collection and receipts of cash. Cash is king. It's lay that out. You can lay it out across industries. It doesn't change. You got to get your cash, make your payments, and conserve cash and bill.
Yeah. And I think that's that cash flow, the cash flow cycle, super critical from that standpoint. Yeah. Very, very important. And I think when we talk about industry specificity, because, hey, I know how the industry works in food, for example, like everyone knows everyone is a small network. The repercussions are big. Same thing with steel. But at the same time, having an agnostic perspective, hey, I worked with this company. They're in the food space. They struggled with this. And this can apply to somebody in a totally different space because it's pretty specific.
Yeah, it's companies themselves. A lot of them are operated similar across industries. I mean, you may have a food company that it has to distribute the food. And that distribution process, although it's food and it may be frozen, it may have unique nuances, it's still similar to somebody that's distributing another product. It has to get from A to B. You've got to get it loaded. You have the process in the, in the facility of doing that. And it has cost. You have overhead, you have hours. So it's that in itself is going to be unique, but the overall process is still the same. Get it out of the facility from A to B as timely and as cheap as possible.
And inventory management on top of that too, and customer relationships and things like that. That's where it's more specific, but building a structure is very critical. So if distressed or near distressed situations happen, where do you typically see the fastest wins for efficiency? Is it the production floor, supply chain, or more administrative?
The production floor would be more of the back end. And I say that because when you're looking at production, it's really costly to implement and it takes time to see it. If you're trying to clean up manufacturing a floor of a facility and you want to get more efficient, move, machine A to here, machine B to here, you've got to really plan out how you're going to do that with your labor as well as the material flowing through. So that's usually back on the back end. On the front end, it's more of that working capital, the AR, the AP. It's also cost cutting from an administrative side. So what jobs may be duplicative, or you're doing something similar. Do I need all of them? Or travel and entertainment expenses, where can I cut those? Deferring CapEx, although we don't want to defer it more than we need to, you want to follow your budget. So if your budget built in, this machine doesn't need to be renovated or refurbished or replaced until 5 years from now, we had it budgeted to occur 2 to 3 years from now, we can push that off. But you don't want to unnecessarily defer it. So it's deferring costs that you can, cutting costs where you can. And then I would also say implementing systems that make sense. Often we see you have those duplicative roles, but you may have inefficient ERP systems that are costing money and time. Although it may take time to implement a new system, that new system can reap multiple benefits when done properly from a cost standpoint, as well as efficiency of the employees and the staff, reducing their workload, making them more efficient in other areas.
Yeah, I always like to say the ERP is the brains of an operation. So to change an ERP, much like on the floor, it's a significant investment. So I'm assuming, to paraphrase you, it's more of like, these are long-term recommendations we would make, but short-term to get you out of this turnaround such scenario. Let's focus on quicker solutions to optimize your cash.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I mean, those quicker solutions, AR, AP, cash collections, but it's also negotiating with your vendors, your suppliers, those relationships you have, looking at what products, and based on your gross margin, where are the profitable, where's that high margin versus the low margin? If there's a low margin product, it may be costing you more than you'd like. So you may want to cut it. You may want to kill it. Focus on those high margin products. That 80-20 rule, what are the 80% that are giving you most of that margin, the 20% that aren't? Why aren't they? Are they worth it? But also realizing that you have to balance that relationship, because it could be customer A is a loss leader, but it's a relationship with customer B, and customer B doesn't want to do it, or they're the same, customer A offers you 2 different products. If you don't get both products from them, then they're not going to service you. So you have to take the loss leader to get the other one, which is your high margin. So it's doing that customer analysis, SKU analyses, all of those are important.
The value proposition of a loss leader per se.
Yeah.
I think we can both relate to this. No one wants to bring in an expert or anyone along those lines to tell them, hey, we need to typically analyze your processes to improve them. So what are some signs when you can say, we should bringing somebody in to say, we should analyze where we're at. Could we improve upon our current processes if there's triggers?
I always look at it, is management and leadership involved? If they're truly involved and they understand what's going on, and they're transparent with their employees, and they can understand that things aren't operating as smoothly as they could, whether it's distress, or look, we lost a customer, or the economic conditions aren't there. Can they internally say, we can right side this? We know we can, and here's how we're going to do it. Not that it's just this happened once this month, we'll fix it. It's, how will you fix it? How will you get there? If you really have that plan, then you may not need a consultant. But there are times where they get in trouble 1 month, they think they're going to fix it. Then it becomes a quarter, then it continues. When those occur, I always look at it, you're better to get somebody objective in there, because your lenders and your creditors want the credibility of somebody that's specialized and understand it. And you can also use us as that bridge or that barrier. Hey, I've got an advisor in here. I'm working with them. I'm following the steps. We're doing the best we can. It's not just management or leadership saying that, the creditors can hold us accountable, and that speaks volume for the company.
And it's an objective plan versus an internal group think process. Hey, we have great systems, things like that. And you can have an objective audit saying, hey, we have someone coming in, because they're proven, because they've worked with their companies to address similar issues. So one of the things that I've been hearing is there's a lot of M&A activity going on, and not to the valuation level, it's like, hey, we have like a 10x value multiplier to sell. It's much, much lower, because this is what I've been hearing, because a lot of companies just want to get out of business. Either they're retiring, or there's just so much uncertainty right now. And that's what I've been hearing. How do you determine whether a company's in a position for a restructure to survive, or if they should just essentially just sell off the business?
So it's really that stress or distress. I mean, when I get brought in, a lot of the time it is because the company is stressed or distressed, and the lender wants that objective set of eyes. And it's looking at, liquidity, cash. Is the company paying on time? Have they defaulted? Have they broken a covenant? If they've done those, then odds are margins are small, cash is constrained, and they're not able to get to where they need to. They've overdrawn. The bank is frustrated. Where in that growing situation, you may, as a company, be feeling the effects of margin shrinking, but you have cash, you have liquidity, you have a plan. Management knew that you'd have this issue. They forecasted it and they're able to come out of it. That's the real difference. Many of the time when we get brought in, it wasn't forecasted, it wasn't planned for, so there's no plan to come out of it. When companies are growing, they may have to lay down some capital to buy things or to expand or open a facility or build that CapEx, knowing that cash is going to be tight for this short time period. We're going to come out of it. Here's how we're going to come out of it.
Yeah. And I think just because business, nothing's certain, having a real plan to go through the ebbs and flows of just the business cycles, I think that's super critical, and being proactive. And I'm sure the bank knows, hey, we're facing a downturn, but we have a strategic plan to work through this appropriately.
Back to what you had said about companies. Given where we are, there are a lot of boomers out there that have companies, and given what's going on with tariffs and all the uncertainty, there is, call it concern, call it wanting to sell just because they don't know. I can tell you that that thought is there. The company has made me some money. Maybe I should consider selling it. I own the land. I own the building. I don't know what the long term is going to be because margins aren't super high. Don't know where we're going to go. So it's definitely a thought. We are seeing it.
Yeah. And I think there's multiple factors. An aging generation, let's say they don't want to hand the business off to their children. They don't want the business, or perhaps there's so much uncertainty. It's like, I just can't handle, I don't have the liquidity to handle the many variables that are coming, declining margins, so many inputs that are outside of my control. Let's talk about the supply chain obstacles right now. I know before we started recording, we were talking about your wife working in logistics. So how are you viewing the global logistic landscape right now with tariffs?
It's a hurdle, to say the least. Like I said, the key word is uncertainty. We don't know where we're necessarily going or what the time frame is. So logistically, it has a lot of companies trying to figure out everything. And it's given them the opportunity to look at, should we renegotiate with our suppliers and with our vendors, using that tariffs as an excuse, but it's also opportunistic because the volume and the costs that are in play right now, although they made sense when those contracts were signed and started, they may not make sense now. We may want to look at, payment terms, volume, etc. So it's out there. From a company and logistics standpoint, I always recommend that companies partner with 3PL logistics companies when it makes sense, because they'll help you maximize efficiencies of the operations as well as the costs.
Yeah, because that's where their whole focus is directly in the distribution space, and they have the context to string that. You bring in a third party versus keeping it in-house, it does actually bring significant value add. And we both have contacts. As you mentioned, your wife works in that space. What advice do you have for them, given the individuals that you speak to? And I mean, neither of us are CFOs or CEOs of corporations, but when you're trying to motivate your employees and trying to bring a level of certainty at the moment, what would you say is kind of like a good...
Yeah, I would say it depends on the size of the business and the relationship that management, whether it's a CEO or the CFO or, directors, have with the other staff. But I'm always a believer of be as transparent as you can with the employees that it's okay to share with. It's let them know where you are, let them know how the company's doing. And that goes not only with the company, but I think externally, working with your suppliers, working with your lenders and your creditors, letting them know the picture of how the company's doing. With that said, I'm a believer of employees getting rewarded based on how the company performs, those performance-based bonuses or compensation, because it motivates everybody to get to a common goal. We're here, we're maybe not doing as well as we wanted to, or we're doing good, but we're not doing great. If we get to here, then we're all, you're rewarded with this.
So kind of like a separate base project approach. Hey, this is the current obstacle. I want feedback from the team to help us achieve where we need to get to as a scenario. And I completely agree with you, because we're all in this together, and we can go through the many negotiations that have taken place in recent memory between labor and management, and true collaboration. Easier said than done, of course, but
always.
But if we have a shared common goal and being transparent, I think that's a true sign of transparent leadership and good leadership. How can digital tools, I think AI is such a cliche, like everyone talks about AI. From your perspective, from an AI standpoint and digital tools, have you seen any company bringing on digital tools to help them optimize their processes?
Yeah, it's when it makes sense and when it's cost effective for them to do it. AI it's been around for a while, but it's using it properly. I look at it from a cash flow perspective is building your cash flows and maybe having some AI in there where it's able to help you figure out how to maximize things or scenario analysis. If this happens or that happens, this is how we go. But then also from an inventory management, AI can be helpful understanding with your customers what their inventory is, anticipating their needs based on this. This is what they're going to need. But it's all about cost effectiveness of it and utilizing it properly because it's not worth having it if you're not going to utilize it properly and it's over and the costs aren't worth implementing.
I just have to laugh because AI is a shiny new toy and how many companies love the idea of it. And if they use it efficiently or not. I've been a victim where it's like, oh, it's so great. And then I realized over time, I can do it so much more efficiently by utilizing it with a certain set of prompts and frameworks that are appropriate and having a guide that can help through that. If you had to give any leaders in manufacturing or in general right now in a very uncertain time, how to plan ahead for the next 12 to 18 months, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, and this is true 12 to 18 months and always, I would say first cash is king. Always need to make sure that you have enough cash and liquidity to get by to plan all the projects. And then I would say really understand your margins. If you have costly products, you may want to consider killing those and focus on the high margin ones. I would say be transparent with your employees. Let them understand what's going on, how you're doing it, transparent with your lenders. And then you're only as good as the information that you have. So financial reporting and getting that data is crucial so that you can understand your position because you're going to want to forecast and put together a budget with various scenarios to understand if this happens, do this, if that happens, do that. Worst case, best case scenarios. Because right now, I think we can all agree that we don't know necessarily where we're going to be in 12 to 18 months. So having that model built, not overly aggressive or overly optimistic, but having a fair, balanced model with worst case, best case scenarios and a couple of other things brought in.
Because you have scenario analysis built in.
Yeah.
If this happens, we can plan appropriately. We have
Yep.
a buffer versus this is going to ruin our business appropriately. So thank you so much for the time. How can we help you, or do you have any asks that you want to give out to everybody as far as best practices to share?
I would just say if you ever have a pit in your stomach, I think it's worth picking up the phone or calling somebody an advisor in the space or somebody that knows the space that can point you into it. Just to have that call of I'm seeing this or I'm feeling this, because too often those feelings are there for a reason. So you're better off acting on it because it could be nothing, but it could be something.
I think I second that approach too, because our network, we're consultants first. We're like, hey, you're doing things great. I objectively looked at this. I'm not here to tell you to change anything, but it's nice to have a vindication of what's good and what's bad. So I think that's really vital, especially in this moment in time, what we're in.
We shoot it straight. We're there to help if you need help, but if you don't need help, it's, hey, you're doing fine.
And we're not successful in our profession if we worked otherwise. So we'd be out of the industry if we acted differently. So
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for the time, Ryan. I really appreciated the conversation and enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.